Beautiful souls, before we dive into today's podcast, your angels want you to know that they are with you right now. Yes, right now. They've guided you here because they want you to feel their presence, their love, and their unwavering support of you. They're reminding you today of this truth. You are ready. You're ready for joy. You're ready for deeper connection. You're ready to receive everything that you've been praying for. Friends, you have done so much for others, your angels say, that it's now time for you to say yes to your own soul, to deepen your connection to yourself, to your angels, and your own divine purpose. Friends, this summer, I'm inviting you to 2 life-changing opportunities. We've got the couples retreat on July 25th through 27th in Oak Brook, Illinois. This is a sacred weekend all about reconnection with yourself, with your partner, and the vision you share for your future. Together, you're going to receive the exact toolbox Blake and I have built and still use every day to nurture a deep spiritual and emotional connection. You'll leave this retreat feeling clear, aligned, and empowered to grow together with love and purpose, guiding every step. We've also got the Sacred Women's Circles. These are new groups that I'm forming. They're very small, intimate groups of about 8 women who gather monthly, online or in person, for about 2 to 2.5 hours of soul deep connection, healing, and divine sisterhood. If you've been craving true spiritual community and a space to be fully seen, this is for you. Your angels are celebrating you today. They're cheerleading you. They're whispering, this right now is your time to soften, to rise, and to align with the life you were made for. So take a breath, tune in, and let's begin. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Angels and Awakening podcast. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancius, and today we're here with Billy Wynne. He's the author of The Empty Path. Welcome, Billy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and whereabouts are you in the world?
I am in Denver, Colorado.
You have a book, the new book, The Empty Path, and the subtitle for the book is Finding Fulfillment Through the Radical Art of Lessening. I think this is so fascinating. How do we practice the art of lessening in our everyday lives in practical terms?
Sure. So I think the key is paying attention to what's here. So the art of lessening is not about turning away from what we're experiencing, from our emotions, from our memories, and so forth. It's really about turning toward them and maybe cultivating a little bit of patience to stay with those experiences just as they are, which has a way of settling our experience of them so that we can see them more clearly and maybe react to them a little bit more in a kind of open-hearted way.
So when something happens in life, we just kind of are always swimming through these different energies, different stuff is coming at us, different stuff we're experiencing. And oftentimes our nervous system can get overwhelmed, can just feel like we're on overload. Especially kind of in this day and age right now. How do you sit with that? Especially when sometimes the questions that we want answered, because I'm a person who just wants to fix things, right? Let's just find the solution, work on it, fix it, and move forward. But the angels have been bringing through this message that sometimes we can't understand everything. Like in order to move forward, sometimes healing comes without understanding. Maybe these are 2 separate questions, but how do you, when you're really overwhelmed and just your body is really in the thick of your nervous system, being flustered, how do you stick with it? Also, when do you need understanding in order to find healing?
a couple of tools, and we all go there, right? We all get agitated. We all get, triggered is a popular word. We all get into a place where we are, prone to reactivity. And a couple of different, number one, we have our breath as an ally and as a support through our life experience. And this is where trying to establish a meditation practice can be helpful, because we can train ourselves to attune to our breath. And then when we get in those circumstances, we have that available to us as a way to sort of calm ourselves back down and recalibrate our nervous system. But another thing is to, again, cultivating an awareness of what's really present. So, and when we can do that, then the thing that is irritating us or triggering us or frustrating us or whatever it is not the only thing, and even that thing, whether it's a coworker or an email or furniture I just stubbed my toe on or whatever it is more than what my instantaneous reaction to it, might suggest. So again, this is the kind of thing that it helps to cultivate it on an ongoing basis, so it is accessible in these frustrated moments where we have a harder time, sort of coming forth as the person that we prefer to be. And your second question is very interesting, because I was actually in a group meditation this morning which I wasn't leading, which is kind of nice, and their focus was on not knowing. Which there's a kind of strong tradition in meditation and in Buddhism around getting comfortable with the fact that very often we don't know. At least we don't know the whole story of whatever it is that we're focusing on. I think that leaning into that and realizing there's a lot of beauty there. You don't have to know, right? You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have an instantaneous solution to life's many difficult challenges, right? So we can be easier with the fact that we don't know. And that actually can tap us into a tremendous amount of creativity, learning, growing, and it's not a conclusion, right? It's an opening to a new story that we can write with that not knowing mind. So it can be very helpful.
One of the other things that I just wanted to kind of tune into with you is I think that there's just so much happening within the world. And I don't know if within Buddhism texts or teachings they talk about, is there a thing where they talk about some people are more highly sensitive or empathic than others? I like that your work on lessening isn't just like lessening stuff, it's lessening the inner clutter that we all have within. With spirituality and just empaths and the world that we live in, so much suffering happening right now. I often hear my angel saying, like, recently in meditation, don't focus as much on the bigger picture, focus in more on your day and like what you can do next, even if you just have to focus in on like the next minute or the next task in front of you, kind of lessening the scope of the picture itself, not in a way that bypasses it. We know that there's suffering, we know that there's a lot happening, but I can't go out and create world peace by snapping my fingers. All that's available to me is to do the very next thing that's in front of me, and to hope that other people are doing their part or their work as well.
What my experience, by the way, I have my own kind of Zen Buddhist, experience, and I cannot speak on behalf of Buddhism, and I continue to study it. There's so much to it, but I would say that, first of all, the tradition of Buddhism, 2,500 years old, has gone through eras of extreme discord, oppression of, Buddhist practice, war, kind of the whole thing. So it has a track record, with the ups and downs of the world. I think another thing that it would tell us is that everybody is unique, right? Everybody comes forth in a unique way, and everybody's awareness of and sensitivity to different developments in the world is going to be different, and our own response to developments in the world is going to change, right, over time, moment to moment, mindset to mindset. So I think all of that is important to keep in mind, so that we can train ourselves to open and close our aperture to the degree it serves us, right? So it may be that all I can focus on is making myself lunch right now, right? And that's my that is what I need to focus on, and that's the extent of my zone of influence at the moment. And there's going to be other times where hopefully I can open my heart to the suffering, and the joy and beauty, but also, yes, the profound suffering and tragedy in the world, and let it in. I mean, I think I open the. I don't usually do this. I tried, frankly, as a practice, especially recently, not to pay too close of attention to the news. And I looked at the cover of a popular newspaper on a Sunday morning, and there was a really, really horrific, tragic picture there. And I think there is, discernment is so important, but it is important to allow our hearts to be broken. Mm-hmm. I think it is important to feel that from time to time, right? There's time for that. And there's time for strength, and there's time for moving ahead with the task before us and so forth. But all of that can be informed by our open-heartedness to the profound suffering, of the world, our own, but also, the many, many beings around us. So
allow it to move us.
Yeah.
And then this question came up too. I'm not going in order here as a good journalist would, but in Buddhism, I've heard that there are beings not exactly angels or called angels, but like angels. Is that true?
Yeah. So the first thing to share about Buddhism is that it is as, diverse and multifaceted in its beliefs and practices and texts as Christianity, any other major world religion. And I didn't know that, I kind of was just sort of naively didn't think that before I became a Buddhist and started really studying
There are
it.
different sects.
Oh, yes.
Like Protestant.
Yes, exactly. Catholic, Protestant, everything from evangelical fundamentalists to Unitarian, the whole array and everything in between, and, the different prioritization of different texts and beliefs is all there also in Buddhism. Yeah, so it's not monolithic. It is very diverse. And again, I cannot speak for any of it, really. I can just tell you about my own Zen Buddhist, but I will try to answer your question. And the answer is that, in classical Buddhism, and what at least many of us call classical Buddhism, which is the Pali text, the original, your Indian, what is now India, region Buddhism practice and text of 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, there was belief in, I'll just call it deities, supernatural beings, right, who have some involvement or influence over the activity of the world. And in the Theravada tradition, which is the closest thing we have to a surviving practice of that original classical Buddhism, and they continue to read the original Pali texts, etc. A lot of Theravadan Buddhists maintain those beliefs in, I'll just call them supernatural beings, but there's lots and lots of different ways to describe it and encounter it and so forth. Less so in what we call Mahayana Buddhism, which is loosely akin to Protestantism, Reform Judaism, like a more modern-ish, but by modern, it started to evolve in 200 or 300 AD. So it's really old, but it's newer than classical Buddhism. And as that evolved, and definitely as it came to the US really in the mid 20th century, primarily in the form of insight or Vipassana Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, that the sort of prioritization of those types of beliefs in supernatural beings, diminished. It's still there in many forms in the U.S., but a distinct minority, I would say, of American Buddhists, prioritize their encounters and worship of and thinking about those types of beings.
How did you get into Buddhism yourself?
Sure. So it started in high school. So I was raised Christian, and I went through different Christian churches when I was growing up. And for a variety of reasons, and including in my book, I talk about basically the dissolution of my family in my life in my adolescent years. And so I was definitely kind of in a seeking, wandering phase in high school. And I think that the first, I'm going to call it text I read was the Tao of Pooh.
Yes.
Right. So, and I a lot about Taoism spoke to me at the time, and I also started to read about Buddhism and read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, in late high school, early college age. And then I minored in religion and focused on Eastern religions when I was in college, and so kind of got the deeper dive into especially Chinese, so Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. And then it just stuck with me over time. And then it was about 10 years ago where I was really ready to turn the page. And some of that had to do with, I also talk about this in my book, my parenting at that time and anger, and I was going to therapy for anger management. And so I was starting to dabble in meditation. And part of it was I read this wonderful book, Mindfulness in Plain English by Bhante Gunaratana. And I loved it. I started practicing it, and I saw that he's a Buddhist, and I was like, a lot of these books that are really secular in nature are written by people who are, and I was like, well, I want to know about that thing. I want to kind of look behind the curtain and go deep on that side of it. And long story, medium length, I then encountered the Zen Center of Denver. I looked for different Buddhist Sangha communities in the Denver area, and through really some happenstance, crossed paths with the Zen Center of Denver, joined them for a Friday morning meditation session, and just immediately was like, this is what I have been looking for. I mean, I've not looked back since, and I've been, very, very committed to that path ever since then.
So when you found that center, for people who don't understand or haven't experienced that before, how is that different from like church on Sunday mornings? Is it a place that you go to? Is it a facility? Is it kind of like a spiritual church in and of itself?
Yeah.
Describe it for us.
Yeah, I love that question, because I think a lot of people, and I had a book event recently where somebody asked a similar question, and that's like, they're like, they thought they couldn't be a Buddhist in America, right? They thought you had to be in Asia, or they thought, you have to be in a monastery in Tibet or something. And no, there are plenty of Buddhist communities. And the short answer is it's not too different. I mean, there's lots of important differences, but it's not too different from a church model. So at the Zen Center of Denver, for example, in most larger U.S. cities are going to have a Zen center. They're probably going to have multiple, Buddhist communities that have brick and mortar buildings where you can go, and smaller areas you're probably going to be thinking more remote, or finding a group of people that you can practice with, because we can come back to that, but it is essential, I think, to have a community of people that you're practicing with. But anyway, so the Zen Center of Denver, a key difference is that Zen in particular, I mean, Zen essentially means meditation in Japanese. Not a lot of people know that, but so meditation is kind of the name of the game in the center. So we have meditation sessions throughout the week. I'm going tonight. I'll go Thursday morning. And then on Sunday morning, we will meditate, but we'll also have like a talk by one of the teachers, or we'll do a ceremony that includes some chanting and kind of like singing. So, it's a Sunday morning thing. And so the pattern of it is not too far afield of a Christian church, for example. But the content is a good bit different, but the sort of schedule is comparable.
When my dad first passed away in 2015, I went to a reader, and she taught me a meditation that I could do. And it opened me up in a way where I could feel something that I never felt before. And I know that not all people are feelers. Some people don't have that kind of feeling, kind of intuition, but it felt like my crown was open. It felt like I could feel into my ORIC-field. It felt like from my heart center, like I was a mini sun that was just radiating out like love to everyone and everything. And I wondered, because you've done so much research with your studies, have you found that too? And do you experience that yourself when you're in meditation, that you feel something shift within, you feel different?
Yeah. That's a great question. Thank you. And really, it's the reason that I've been meditating so long, and I just meditate more and more as I go. And I tell this to people. I teach a lot of meditation classes, and people ask me about starting a meditation practice. And what I tell them is that a key reason that people are able to stick with it is because if you give it an earnest shot, early on in the practice, you will have a moment. It might be 2 seconds. It might be very brief. But this is what happened for me, and I think this is typical of people who go down the meditation path. Is I had a very brief encounter with a sense of peace that I had never had before. Mm-hmm. And it's that you're like, oh, like this is what people are talking about. This is why meditation is such a thing, is because of this feeling of peace and ease that I don't get normally elsewhere. Yeah. So absolutely. And that the beautiful thing is that experience, that feeling can grow and deepen and become more common, in meditation practice as you go along. It's just like going to the gym. It's like the first day you could barely lift the bar, and then a year later you got the big, it gets easier and stronger with practice.
Early on, when I started getting into more spirituality and getting certified in different things, I really wanted to talk about this a lot with my husband because we're so close, and he didn't understand a lot because he's not he wasn't back then a deeply spiritual person. And I just kept hearing every time I would pray on it, let us bring it to him in his own way. And I guess that's another question for you. It's different for men than women sometimes, like how you come to your own spiritual center and your own spiritual practice. He did end up finding, he was watching a documentary on the Beatles, who he loves, and found that they traveled to India and they found transcendental meditation. So he and I both went and we tried TM, and you kind of get your own mantra that you say to yourself. And with that meditation, I felt very different from the first meditation that we talked about, because with this, it felt like a different energy, almost that if I was at the bottom of the ocean, kind of like sitting in lotus position, but that there was all of that noise outside in the world, but that I was just purely safe and kind of calm. It was more like a groundedness. Whereas when I'm in the other meditation, I feel very floaty and almost like I'm more out here in my ORIC-field. In your research and your experience, are there different types of meditations that kind of tune you into more your ORIC-field or more ground you within?
Yes. And there's a wide array of meditation practices, and they get more and more refined with time. And people are, kind of inventing new techniques. This is not a stagnant, tradition. It continues to evolve, and people have new insights. So the short answer is yes. And even like, for example, I'm a teacher in the Insight meditation tradition, and we have in my book has one guided meditation per chapter, 10 chapters. So, there's 10 different meditations there. One is a metta, loving kindness meditation. One's mindfulness of breath, body scans, all those different things. And those different techniques will yield different types of feelings and different types of insight, different types of, emotional experience. And that's all to the good. And also, like, people will find what means something to them, right? I mean, obviously. So that's one reason that I think it's great that there's such a menu of meditation practices, because you're like, well, for example, I can't say, well, there's walking meditation. If you're like, I have a really hard time sitting still, or if you're like, I have trouble going to sleep, well, a body scan while you're laying down can be very effective for that situation. So, yes, is the answer. I think it's all for the good.
Do you find too, and I don't know how to describe this other than if I can just tune myself in every morning, for a minute, 10 minutes, whatever I have, I can come back to that frequency more and more, just that radiant sun, that radiant love. I can be in it, not all day, but very often, like most of the day. I think that a lot of times people think of meditation as, okay, this is something on my to-do list. I have to sit down 20 minutes in the morning or 20 minutes before bed and just clear my mind. Do you feel like you can hold it more like your eyes are open, you're doing work, you're going about your day, you're writing your book, but you're in that vibration?
Yeah. So in Buddhism, at least my Buddhism, we call it practice on the mat and practice off the mat. So on the mat is the dedicated meditation practice in the morning, like you said. You set your timer and you do the thing, and then it's over, and you go do other things. So, and then the meditation off the mat, or mindfulness off the mat, or practice off the mat is everything else, right? It's the rest of your life, and so there are numerous sort of techniques and tricks and hacks and whatever for trying to re-access that sense of peace that you might have had while meditating, and also practice off the mat is the distinction between practice on the mat and practice off the mat diminishes over time if you're committed to practicing them. And so, now when, I'm getting up off of the mat and moving into, breakfast with my family or whatever the next thing is, it's not like, okay, I'm done meditating and now here's the rest of my life. It's like, it's more, it is a different experience. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's not like the same
Yeah.
as when I'm sitting on the mat, but
Sure.
that peaceful frame of mind, right?
Yeah.
It grows and expands and it gets easier to access. And it becomes less of a like, oh, that's how I feel when I'm meditating, and this is how I feel, for the rest of the day. It's like it starts to kind of calibrate together.
So going back to that other question, I think one of the biggest questions that I get asked from women is like, Julie, I feel like I'm a spiritual person and I really want to be on this journey with my partner, my spouse, my husband. They're just not totally into it. And I find that men tend to have an easier time with meditation. Like they can understand it, they can grasp it. It's something like real, practical. They can just go sit down and do it. How do you find that more men find their way to a spiritual practice?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great question. And in the early days of writing my book, there was thought about making it more about this question, and particularly for other, myself and for other men, and really trying to work with, the problem of manness right now. And part of that is a resistance to emotionality. It's a resistance to sensory experience of our bodies. It can be a resistance to spirituality, really going deep with it, et cetera. So I say that on behalf of men. I think it's also true, though, and to some degree, I mean, at least at the Zen Center of Denver, there's more men than women, and there may be something about that and about meditation. I don't know if, lots and lots of women, of course, also meditate. I'll tell you, my wife does not meditate on a consistent basis. She has done, she knows about mindfulness and has some of those practices. And there's part of me that's like, it would be wonderful if she came with me to the Zen Center of Denver, and she has a couple of times, but she really, it's just not her thing, and she's not going to do that. So I think, let's try to answer your question. So first of all, I'd say in chapter 7 of my book, it's about love and relationships. And so the thing that's coming to mind for me in my, in hearing your question is this idea. So in the book, I share the story of at our wedding, and the Unitarian minister who married my wife and I used the analogy of the wedding knot as kind of the typical traditional way to think of marriage. And he said, if you think about it, that's very constricting. It's like it's tight, it's bound, it is controlling to some degree, one hand of the other. And he said, what if we imagine marriage like this? So we're touching, but we're free, to move and grow and evolve and explore. But we don't, hopefully we don't separate, but we give each other the space to kind of find our own way, which, and I go deeper into this in that chapter, but for me, that is a truer expression of love, right? Love says, you do you, and you find you, and I trust you, right? To figure your path out. And if and I'm going to do the same, right? And if we love each other, then we're both free to evolve and grow, and hopefully we support each other, we express some interest in what the other one's doing, of course, but we kind of allow each other to be us and grow as we will grow. And I think that philosophy, which fortunately my wife does share, I think has frankly saved our marriage. And we've been married for 22 years or so, and we've seen how I got married when I was 27 or something like that. So people change, right? I have changed. She has changed. We've changed. And good, right? That's good. And it's unavoidable. And so I just think if you're hanging on to who you think your partner was or should be, then fissure is a much more likely outcome. Unfortunately, So
And you can always have like girlfriends that you can share your spirituality with, or
That's true.
friends
That's
that,
true. There's other people out there.
Yes, 100%. And for those who are listening and didn't see Billy's hands, he kind of put them like in a prayer shaped, and then allowed like one hand to slide up and the other to slide down, go back and forth. And it just like allows for the two people to have this beautiful movement. I think that that's so wonderful. And you also said you do you, which is a phrase that I heard a lot of times at the beginning when I was getting started in this. Like, just focus in on yourself. You don't have to worry about what your partner is doing. They're on their own journey, and Spirit's going to bring them where they need to be in their own time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thank you for reminding me we're on audio. So no,
that's okay. We've got video too, but more people definitely listening than watching. Yeah. Another part in your book is you talk about that you gave up drinking alcohol without participating in AA or traditional programs. What was that like for you? And what are your thoughts on the sober curious movement that's been going on for the past few years?
Sure. Yeah. So I really feel lucky. My wife calls it a miracle. I mean, I was a very aggressive drinker for 25 years, and it created a lot of harm, for me and the people around me. And there's a couple of reasons that I was able to quit. I think in that, from what I hear, relatively easily. And one of them is I was in my meditation and Zen Buddhist practice, and specifically, I was in what we call the Jukai processes, where a student adopts we call them the Bodhisattva precepts. I won't go too deep into the wonky terminology here, but basically they're ethical guidelines. And so one of them is about misusing alcohol and drugs. And so it does not mean it stems from the early days of monastic rules where there was no drinking. Of course, but now in modern times it's more fluid, and it's really up to the student to find out what that precept means for them. Well, so many modern American Buddhists do drink, and that but for me, encountering that precept in 2018, 2019, the writing was on the wall that I could not be in integrity and in accord with that precept and continue to drink. So that was a key factor in my decision to drink. Another one was that my wife, Christy, was going down the non-drinking path. She actually quit drinking a month before me. Now she didn't ask me to not, I think she knew better. Yeah, she wasn't this was not for her or because of her, but it did help that she was exploring it. And actually there was an article that she wrote loosely based on her reading of Annie Grace's This Naked Mind. And Annie was very kind to endorse my book. And Christy got certified as a teacher in Annie's curriculum for This Naked Mind. But really helping Christy write that article brought me into the neuroscience and, the evolving science around alcohol, one key aspect of which is that no amount of alcohol is healthy. And I'm not going to go into a big thing about this, but there is a ongoing belief, propagated by very self-interested enterprises that some amount of alcohol is actually good for you. And that is not true. Just so everybody knows. But so that was a factor. And I, also maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I remember going on a yoga retreat, and no offense to the proprietors of this yoga retreat, but it was in Napa Valley, and we would get hammered in the evening on wine. And, that stuff goes on. It's like, let's go for a 10K and then let's drink at the beer garden. And it's like that, look, everybody's got to do their thing, but let's not pretend they're consistent with each other, right? Yoga in the morning and hammered in the afternoon is not, they're not congruent. I'm sorry. So all those factors. So finally, sorry, the big thing, really, one of the big things was the movement going on. This gets to the second half of your question. Yeah. At the time and still to today, not just kind of about yes, to some degree sober curious in the sense that there was a community supporting people to choose not to drink who didn't necessarily, didn't identify as alcoholics or were participating in AA. So that helped me just make that choice. Also, the very beautiful growing array of alcohol-free drinks. I don't do a lot of that now, but at the time, knowing I could have a tasty alcohol-free beer or cocktail, mocktail, that helped me through that transition. So I'm all for it. I mean, whatever helps people get right with their relationship to alcohol. And I don't, even despite all the things I just said, I don't evangelize to anybody to stop drinking. You have to find out where your place is with that chemical. But, whatever tools, mechanisms, AA, not AA, whatever, that gets people to that place of peace and, ease in their life, I'm with it.
I grew up in a family where my dad's dad was an alcoholic and went to AA. Because of that, my dad would have a drink every now and then, but just very rarely. Mm-hmm. And same thing on my husband's side with his dad and his grandfather. Dad didn't drink because it ran in the family. I've noticed within myself just over the last couple of years, as we've had like social groups and you're around people and you just have this drink here and there. We talk about Dr. Amen here on the podcast too, so people know who he is. And he'll say there isn't any amount of alcohol that is safe to drink. And he's put people in brain scanners for the last 35 years. Awesome. And I really trust his expertise. But just the way that it would make me feel emotionally and just kind of mess with my mood and my mental state, even days later. I feel like I'm very sensitive to caffeine too when I feel it days later. I can't drink coffee every day. Drink one here and there, but even that kind of messes me up. And I was noticing the same thing with alcohol too. I said that to my husband recently, like, I can't do it. Like, it's totally fine if you do. It really is messing with me even more as I'm kind of going through perimenopause and hormone levels just being all over the place. I wondered, how did that have any impact on like your friendships or like couple friends or just socializing at all?
Probably a little bit, especially at first, because people were so used to me, not only drinking, but kind of leading the charge on the drinking. So I think it was an adjustment for a lot of people. I think that, there probably were some questions about, is Billy going to go out anymore? Is Billy going to be fun anymore? Or, if I ever was, I don't know. But, am I going to enjoy like hanging with Billy anymore? And also, I didn't just quit drinking. I opened an alcohol-free bar. So I was like, it was well known, and advertised that this was my path. And I was, a bit of a, evangelizer of the alcohol-free, I still am to some degree, path of life. But I have not lost any friends. I think there's probably been some situations maybe, and again, my wife also doesn't drink. So, that we haven't been invited to, or, but I can't cite any friends who I'm not friends with anymore. And actually, at least in terms of my experience of socializing, I'm having more fun. I'm happier. I'm, many of those times, like, I like would go to concerts that I was super excited about and I would black out, or I would be in conversations with people and I would, just blah, wasted. Yeah. Right. And that's not fun for anybody.
No, for sure.
So I think that's a good question. There's a lot of fear, I think, and a lot of, it's one thing people often cite for continuing to drink. So I have to drink because I want to socialize, and, maybe internally they may not say it out loud. They think they won't be as fun or as funny or whatever. And I honestly believe that after a little bit of a transition period, your socializing will be better for you and your friends if you're not drinking than when you were.
You dedicated a chapter in your book to forgiveness, and that seems to be a very important part of your path. Tell us more about why forgiveness is so important.
Sure. Yeah. So, for me, forgiveness is sort of at the heart of the emotional journey, and it's both of ourselves and of others. I start that chapter by describing some really regrettable incidents with my children, and it's like, what do I do with that? I did it. It caused harm. And here I am, how am I going to try to get to peace with that situation? And that's, we have so many, at least speak for myself, so many mistakes, countless, big and small. And it's, what do we do with that? And so I think that it's important also to note that chapter comes after the chapter I talked about love, where I really focus on boundaries and, again, allowing each ourselves and others to kind of come forth as we are and as we will. And so for me, forgiveness, the beginning of forgiveness is that it is not about the other person, right? Mm-hmm. It is about ourselves coming to peace with whatever it was, whether it was something that we did or something that they did. And so to approach forgiveness with an expectation that the other person is going to react in a certain way or do the right thing or forgive us in return is a recipe for failure. right?
Yeah.
Because it maintains that sort of sense of like the thing that's going to make me happy and fulfilled is out there. I have to go get it, persuade it, acquire it, convince it, and then I'm going to be, and then if they comply, then I'm going to be happy. Well, life does not work that way, and so really, what we can do is find our own center and our own peace with the situation. And so the process, and it is a process, it ebbs and flows. If it's a major event, it's unlikely to be final, in my opinion, at least in my experience. Then it, the step one of the process is turning toward the event or incident or, relationship as it is, right? So to try to re-encounter the circumstances as best as we can, minus the emotional overhang and thoughts and judgments and, all these types of things that immediately rush in when we encounter that situation, and try it again, see it with the big lens of who we are, who they are, all the, in Buddhist term alert, causes and conditions for the way that we are, not to approve and not to take away responsibility, because, we're not here to approve, and we're not, we are always responsible whether we like it or not, but to freshen our lens for what happened and how we can be with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal of the forgiveness, process. And I have a guided meditation, and there's, like, for example, so a very prominent person in my life, I wrote a letter, to them, and I was deciding whether or not to send it. And I realized that if I did, I was not able to detach myself from my expectations of how they would respond. So I didn't send it. I read it to my wife instead. And it was a very, very moving and powerful experience, to be honest. And so, but that type of practice, which is also in the book, is part of this effort, this movement in the direction of forgiveness. And it's rarely, just to conclude, something, and to set expectations, one and done. It's like, we do my forgiveness meditation for 12 minutes. You're not going to forgive your parent for the terrible,
Right.
like that. Please forget about all of that. But it might start to soften the edges, right? And then a month later, try it again. And then a month later, write the letter, get all your feelings out on paper, and then just, where to go from there. So, it's all, to me, the heart of the practice is about entering into the next moment with an open heart. And so we really can't do that freely and peacefully and lovingly if we're hanging on to our anger at ourselves and other people.
I love how you reframe that, because I think you just kind of solved one of the hugest misconceptions on forgiveness. I think a lot of people grew up thinking that if you forgive and you did it the right way, that it should never come back. Like the feeling should never come back. And that hasn't been my experience of forgiveness at all. Forgiveness is a process that you kind of, I love how you said soften, you soften to it and it starts to shift and starts to change over time. It seems to be the best that we can do with it at this point in consciousness that we're all in. In the book, you suggest that we're all whole and complete right from the very beginning, which I just think is such truth. On the other hand, we all have significant challenges in our lives, and billions of people, like we were talking about at the beginning, just struggle to get their basic needs met, like food, water, shelter. In what sense do you feel that all people are whole and complete? And what does this mean for the suffering and the injustice we see every day?
So I'll tell you where it comes from for me, and I also want to acknowledge it comes from lots of different places for lots of different people, right? And so for some, it's a spiritual source, and for me, it comes from my Zen Buddhist practice, and at the heart of it, and it's why the book is called The Empty Path, is because as we inquire into the nature of things and into our own nature, and increase our ability to settle our thoughts and judgments and kind of the stories that we create about our life experience, then we can begin to see that the sort of boundaries and identities that we apply to things are really just in our mind. And that, as we slowly let those things go, and as we see things who don't have these kind of coherent, permanent identities that we assign to them, then there's no separation between us and the things around us. And I mean that literally. So if we can open our hearts and minds to that and see that we are all things, then there's nothing lacking. There's nothing missing. It doesn't mean there's no sadness or tragedy. There most definitely is, but it's whole. It's a part of the whole. And so with that, then there's, that in Buddhist terms relaxes our attachment to other things, our craving for things to be something different than they are. And I'll use, I think where the rubber meets the road is like, what do we do then? And so I talk about it in the book, and it's part of the reason that I closed Awake, the bar, is because the alcohol-free bar, I couldn't do it in a way that was peaceful and easy and loving. Like I couldn't be the person that I, intended to be with that, even though that was a well-intended and I think, hopefully to some degree beneficial contribution to the world. I was as stressed and suffering as I'd ever been. And so the thing that I believe is whatever we decide we can contribute to the world, whatever we can do about the suffering of others, that a very important guidepost is how do we feel and how are we when we are doing it, right? So like if we're working for a nonprofit and we have a social justice, outcome that we are pursuing, this is very kind of simplified, but there's really two ways to do it. One is the people who disagree with me are my enemy. I'm going to, direct all of my firepower at them to defeat them. And I'm going to be tense and angry and aggressive and assertive and, blah, 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 blah. There's that approach. There's another approach that says, this is complicated. There's lots of different viewpoints. I'm not certain that my opinion is the correct one. I can have my beliefs and values, but I can let go of my certainty, right? And I can show up every day for this task with a light heart, right? And I think some people are afraid that means they don't care or that they're not going to be as effective. But I believe, and in my experience, that we're actually much more effective and we don't get burned out, right? And we don't quit and we don't, get stressed or as stressed. We're going to get some stress, but we're going to be lighter and easier and more creative and more loving. And we're going to kind of manifest and be the outcome that we are pursuing on the course of that effort. So I think that there's everything about the practice of cultivating peace and love and centeredness in our lives is ultimately about our contribution to the world around us, right? And that's another thing that kind of a misnomer that on at the beginning and from the outside, meditation can look like a very selfish, kind of self-indulgent practice. Like you're just sitting there, right? What could be more, kind of self-interested than that? But it's a part of how we're structuring our lives to do the things that we care about, right? I mean, and the time we spend there, I believe and assert, and will make us more effective in accomplishing the justice-oriented outcomes that we're pursuing elsewhere in our life.
One more question on this tied in with what you were just talking about. I think that there are a lot of people who feel a deep sense of guilt, for things that were not even in our control, right? Yeah. Like it kind of gets to bigger questions of, well, why was I born in this part of the world when somebody else was born in another part that isn't as fortunate and they have a much different life and much more difficulty and challenge? I don't know that guilt for a long time does a lot for us. I think it kind of hinders us from doing much good in the world. Yeah. But how do you see that and how do you work through it?
As with all of our, emotions, they can be teachers, right? And so what might start as guilt could be awareness. It could be attention, to our own experience and that of others. I do think that it is important to inquire into ways in which we might be contributing to the injustice around us, even if we have no kind of conscious intention of that. And that can be painful and challenging, and I don't also think that there are not clear answers to these types of questions of, kind of where does my responsibility begin and where does it end? And what have I caused and what have I not caused? And that sort of thing. But I think those are very, very good questions to inquire into. And so, like you said, I think that there's, healthy awareness and there's unhealthy awareness. And the healthy awareness is steering toward our capacity to let in our emotional experience and that of others, and, to come forth and address it, right, one way or the other. And in some cases, addressing it might mean it's not my responsibility, it's out of my control. I'm not going to focus on it. I know it's there, but it's right. And what I am going to focus on is the things that are in my control and are within my capacity with, like, the skills and time and whatever that I have, to actually do something about that thing. And that is our contribution to the world, is what we actually do, right, and say and encounter in our own lives. I think there is I do this a lot. I think we all do it. There's a feeling that we owe the world our suffering, right? Like, it's like the way to atone for the relative luxury and comfort that I have in my life compared to so many people around the world is for me to feel guilty and to, be unhappy or, and I don't think that anybody wants that or benefits from that. What we owe the world is our peace, and our happiness. Yeah. Like Thich Nhat Hanh and other, are really wonderful spokespeople for this, that, like, happiness is a contribution to the world. If it comes from a heart, heart-centered place, right? Not, of course, like a kind of scoffing or whatever kind of happiness, but a genuine joy for sure. Being alive in the world, and is a contribution to others. And so I don't think we should hesitate, to be happy if we feel happy. Yeah.
Amazing. Billy, you're such a wonderful speaker, presenter. Your book is just filled with so much radiant love. Tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
Thank you so much, Julie. BillyWynne.com is going to be the easiest thing to do to follow me and find ways to buy the book. There's also audio guided meditation recordings on my website. There's information about upcoming book events, and I do a lot of online things. I have something coming up next Monday. So BillyWynne.com is your one-stop shop for catching up with me one way or another.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, your work, and just for being here with us.
Thank you, Julie. It was a pleasure.
I hope you felt your angels wrapping you in love today. They want you to remember you are never alone. You are always being guided to the next right step on your own soul's journey. If you're ready to deepen your journey even more, I have 2 ways to support you right now. I offer discounted readings on my website every once in a while. I'm doing it right now, where you can have a session with me that will be shared on the podcast. These readings are powerful, personal sessions where we connect with your angels and your loved ones on the other side and bring through the exact guidance your soul is ready to receive. And enrollment is open for the all-new class of the online Angel Reiki School that's beginning July 1st. This is where you'll get certified in mediumship, energy healing, and angel messages all in one program. You'll learn how to develop your intuition to the max, and I'll personally walk you through starting your own spiritual business. If your heart is calling you to become a healer, messenger, or light worker, this is your sign. Sign up today at theangelmedium.com. Everything you need is waiting there for you. Friends, feel that love of your angels surrounding you and have a beautiful, beautiful, blessed day. Don't forget to listen to your intuition and all the signs your angels are sending you today. Mwah.